now the deep dive is really to look at items that should be on your radar, as I said, and we want to talk about everything. Obviously, the time to our disposal is limited. So actually, I will also start the timer because otherwise I will go on forever. And to keep in check. So let's see here. What we want to really put on your mind is what some of the concerns are, what items you should have on your radar, what they are, and why are they important? How can they be addressed in a property purchase? So who can help you with each of them so that you can leverage the presence of other people involved in a property purchase? And when is it advisable to work on them? So all these questions that a person might have, we're going to try to address them. However, we can only touch on some of these concerns. Look at this. We have identified some of the most common concerns that a person should have or items that buyers should make sure that are taken into consideration when buying a property. Now, as I said, this is a very long list. There are more items we couldn't fit in this slide, and definitely we will not be able to address all of them today. While we prepare perhaps another webinar, a course where we address all of them and more, and with more details, we will talk about 7 or 8 of them. We'll see how much time we have. So in this slide, you will see that we have identified also among the people who we mentioned earlier who are involved in Italian property purchase, who might be a better person, the best player, the best subject to help you with each of these items. To a certain extent, a notary and a real estate agent can definitely facilitate you getting the help you need. However, if you want a buyer-focused approach, then obviously you would need your own independent advisor. So you can even go to, not necessarily to a lawyer, you can even hire a notary to assist you individually outside of the deal. Many people don't know this, but you could hire a notary just as a consultant. However, it's not very common and it's not even very easy. Notaries in Italy are extremely busy, and so usually the lawyer is the profession you want to go to. So let's look at some of them. And let's start by saying that in Italy, as crazy as it might sound, there is no seller's disclosure. You go buy a property, you go look at a house, open house, whatever. There's no seller's disclosure, not even if the sale goes through a real estate agent. So how do you know what you're buying? By asking questions. If you look at any listing, and Rafaela mentioned you, those websites, go there and you will see what you find. You, as Rafaela was saying, need to bridge the gap by asking questions. And this is one example of some of the questions you need to ask. We will put together a more comprehensive list, and we'll be happy to share it with people who are here today to thank you for being here today with us. And this is all exclusive, it's going to be exclusive material that is not going to go on the video that will be posted on YouTube just for you guys. So let's go to some of the specific items I mentioned. So for example, in Italy in 1992, asbestos became illegal. So you cannot anymore build using asbestos. However, also the law says that if there is asbestos, a property owner has to remove it. And to remove it, you have to have a licensed asbestos removal representative, the person, or you have to have the local township be involved, and you also have to pay for safe disposal, plus the health hazard that we all know what asbestos, with how asbestos might be dangerous. So how do you overcome this issue? Well, unfortunately, as I said, this is not a matter that would be on the radar of a notary, realtor. The owner might not even know that there is asbestos on their property. A surveyor is someone who, upon your request, might do a property inspection specifically focused per your instructions to check if the property has asbestos or not, doesn't have asbestos. And you want the surveyor to provide you with an affidavit under oath signed in court, because that is the most effective and reliable way of getting a certificate that the property is clean from asbestos. And if there is asbestos, or if you don't have time to get that check done, in the purchase offer, you want to make sure that the purchase offer is contingent to asbestos-free check. And if asbestos is found at the property, the seller agrees and commits to do everything needed to remove it prior to closing at his or her expense. Next, seller's domicile. So if you are buying a property from someone from overseas who is selling it, and incidentally, someone in the chat was asking if we will do a similar webinar for people from overseas who are selling properties, we will. However, so if you are selling if you're buying a property for someone who is selling, who lives over, who yes, lives overseas, so someone who might have purchased the property and is selling it, right? So you are going to sign a purchase offer. In the purchase offer, the first part of any purchase offer presented to you will have the details of the buyer and the seller. And there will be their name, last name, and their home address. Obviously, as I was saying earlier, you always start with the mindset that everyone is in good faith and everything will go well. However, sometimes things don't go well. And if things don't go well, you want to be prepared. How do you get prepared? You get prepared showing your muscles should the need be. How do you show your muscles? By sending an initial warning letter, a letter before action. And then if the issue gets worse, you might have to start mediation, dispute, and perhaps even a trial in court to get, who knows, your money back if you paid a sizable deposit. How do you go through these processes? By serving the seller. Imagine if the seller is based overseas. You will have to go through the Italian court system of serving someone overseas, which requires the serving paperwork to be fully certified, translated, to go through the bailiff court system, served overseas, give the other party more time to respond because the law gives people living overseas more time to respond to legal claims. So all of that will aggravate your remedies to a level that might make them even unsustainable financially or more expensive than the claim you are pursuing. So you might just drop it and forfeit your deposit. So how do you resolve it? You resolve it by adding in the purchase offer a specific dispute clause where the seller elects or names an Italian address, can be anything, and even the real estate agent for what you care. An Italian address where the seller explicitly accepts to be served, and even if he's not physically there, the clause will say that the seller will be deemed as properly served upon successful delivery of the paperwork, and that will overcome the restrictions that would otherwise apply to serve the seller overseas. So you want to have that clause in the purchase offer. Another concern is when you have a situation where perhaps the sellers, there's more than one seller. For example, three siblings who have inherited their parents' home. And you want to know that there's more than one seller because you want to avoid any situation when, once again, in the event of issues during the transaction, one of them might decide to have a different approach. And the three sellers decide to have a dispute among themselves or decide that for whatever reason, one decides to drag their feet or be difficult. So how do you overcome this issue? Which ultimately will create on you tremendous disadvantage because you would have three people to send letter before action, mediation, and court trial, as I was referring to before. So how do you overcome this issue that it is multiplied when you have multiple sellers? By adding a specific clause called severability clause in your purchase offer. So who helps you with that? Unfortunately, none of the professionals or the people who are listed here. Sometimes a notary, if you have the opportunity to involve a notary at the time of the purchase offer, but usually notaries are not involved at the time of purchase offer. So that's why there is a no here. But if you have a notary already lined up at the time of the purchase offer, you can involve a notary and have the severability clause, meaning each and every seller will be fully liable entirely with respect to the entire deal. So what that will create is leverage because all of them will want each of them to comply. Otherwise, they will be responsible among themselves and with respect to you. So it will multiply their liability. And when you are signing a purchase offer and sellers are confident that everything will be right because they are reassuring you multiple times so, they will sign it. And it will be a good faith sign on their part. And it's so easy to add that clause. It's really something that you want to have. Another item you want to think about when you are signing a purchase offer, and this is something that is so underrated. You want enhanced deadlines in favor of you as a buyer. What is an enhanced deadline? In general, people don't realize this, but most purchase offers have deadlines that are exclusively in favor of the seller. I'll give you an example. If you are buying a property and the seller has to remove the furniture before closing, or the property is occupied by a tenant and the tenant has to leave, or you want to add a bathroom and the seller agrees to file a permit because permits can only be filed by the owner, and the property purchase is contingent to the permit. So usually the structure of a standard purchase offer is the buyer is committing to buy as far as the seller does X by closing, removes the tenant, obtains the permit for the bathroom, vacates the property from the furniture, whatever it is, by closing. So you are overseas, you are in Australia, and I saw there are some people from Australia who joined this meeting, in Australia, in Canada, in North, whatever, and you have someone in Italy working on a contingency with the deadline, which is the same as closing. So on one side, there's you who have to do everything, put everything in order, and line up your money, your notary, your flight, your power attorney, everything ready for closing, without knowing if by the time of closing, the seller will be able to fulfill to that contingency. And that's silly because if you don't show up and the seller last minute actually is ready, you will be in breach of contract. And if the seller is not ready, you cannot claim seller's breach of contract because in the largest majority of cases, a slight delay of 15 days or even 30 days would not put the seller in breach of contract. So how do you resolve this? Well, you want to have in the offer, in the purchase offer, whatever the contingency is, whatever you expect to be verified by a term that is focused on your side. For example, I want you, seller, to give me proof that the property is being vacated at least 30 days prior to closing, or the purchase is subject to the building permit to have an extra bathroom that I need to receive at least 30 days before closing. So at that point, you kind of put a little bit of pressure on the seller and give yourself that buffer time to verify, first of all, what the seller is claiming, having met that condition, and then move forward and with peace of mind, plan the next steps for closing, knowing that everything's going to go as planned. Because in Italy, unfortunately, there's not a lot of planning with real estate as you might have in your home country. Everything is a little bit more improvised when there are contingencies, not because people are not good planners per se, but because the bureaucracy gets in the middle. And unfortunately, that sometimes issues that nobody could have even expected or imagined might come up. So another something else you want to definitely think about if a deal looks good, looks very good, almost too good to be true. Well, you want to check if there's something else behind it. A few times we have found that there was something else behind it. For example, a seller wanted to get rid of real estate because he knew that he would have gone bankrupt very soon, and he wanted to get rid of an asset that otherwise would have been foreclosed. Well, if you buy a property significantly under market value or even per market value, but in a very close to a bankruptcy, when a bankruptcy eventually might happen after closing, your transaction might be considered completely null, revoked, they say. So you might lose your property and might have to join all the creditors of the seller in the bankruptcy to try to recover some of the money that you gave the seller. So how do you overcome this? You want always, regardless what the price of the property is, you want to always make sure that there are no indication of potential bankruptcy. And it's not hard to do it. It just takes really a little bit of research on the Chamber of Commerce and see if there is indication of the seller being part of an unlimited liability business or having a directorship, being an officer in a company that might carry personal liability, or if there might be bounced check. There is a very easy record, public register you can check very easily in Italy. So there are certain areas where a professional can help you. Hey, can you help me checking the solvency of this seller? And if there are two sellers, you want to do that on both sellers. Escrow account, Rafaela mentioned it. Escrow account is another item that is many times underestimated. People many times tell us, oh, we know about escrow account. We use it all the time in the US or in Canada. It's very common to use an escrow account. Yes, in Italy, it's a little bit more complicated. First of all, they came out with the escrow account regulation something like 3 years ago. So it's very, very fresh. And the way they, in general, adopted is a way that is not really reassuring from a buyer, in my opinion. Meaning, if everything goes well, it's fine because it goes well and everything goes smoothly. But if things don't go well, what can happen? I'll give you a couple of examples. For example, if you send the money to a notary to hold it until the transaction is fully completed, and the notary then has to release the money when the title is registered in your name in first position and everything goes smoothly, you will sign the closing, the seller will sign, the notary will register your name on title, and once that is done, the notary will release the money to the seller. However, sometimes it happens that between the time when you transfer the money to the notary and closing, many times at closing, some issues arise because the buyer expected that something would have been included, and many times a buyer will meet the notary for the very first time at closing. And between the interpreter, who is not a legal professional, as Rafael will tell you later, and all the other pressure and fuzziness of a transaction overseas, you might discover things that you were not really made aware of before. So if at closing you say, hold on a second, let's regroup and let's postpone closing to a couple of weeks, and things go south because you realize that something was not checked or was not going as you expected, and you say, okay, you know what, let's pull this off. Notary, give me the money back. The seller might say, no, 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 hold on a second. I think that you cannot do that because you have a purchase offer that is signed and there were no caveats in that purchase offer. So we need to go through. So a dispute arises, not necessarily in court. The notary will see that there is a conflict of opinions and basically instructions from the two parties who are the players in that transaction. And the notary will say, you know what? I need a court order to decide who should I give the money to because I'm not here in the position to advise either of you because I'm a neutral party. I'm not judge. I need a judge to tell me who should get the money. So you will have to start a lawsuit, mediation first, lawsuit, and then eventually, if you get a court order in your favor, get the money back from the notary. And your money might be parked there for all that time, which might be years. So how do you overcome this? In the escrow account, you had to add specific, inequivocable provisions, terms, return the funds to you as per your personalized, clear, and objectively verifiable events. For example, the seller might totally agree that if for whatever reason closing doesn't go through by that date, upon your simple request, you can get your money back from the notary, and the seller agrees not to dispute this clause, whatever might happen at closing. So by adding that simple clause in your purchase offer, for example, or along the, during the process, whenever the money is requested to be transferred, better the purchase offer, obviously, will help you tremendously securing a situation when you want your money back from the notary. Then January 1st, 2024, a month and few days ago, the law changed about capital gains tax. Now, why are we talking about capital gains tax in a property purchase workshop? Because capital gain taxes are something that the Italian government cares a lot, and the law changed in January for the wars, obviously. So the law before used to be this: when you buy a residential property and you hold it for 5 years and you sell it after 5 years, there is no capital gain taxes on the seller. Now, you might have heard of the incredible remodeling tax credits that Italy has provided to stimulate the economy in COVID. Some were really amazing. They gave 110% of what you would spend on a remodeling project. So they backpedaled a little bit at the government level. And they said, you know what? If you were able to take advantage of those tax credits, your capital gains should be taxed. And not only should be taxed if you sell it within 5 years, but also the money that you spent on that remodeling for which you receive capital gains will not be considered a tax deduction. So they will not increase your acquisition cost. And for everyone, the capital gain tax-free term will stay 5 years. But for people who took one of those crazy COVID tax credit incentives, it is going to be 10 years, starting January 1st this year. So, as I was saying, Italian government really cares for money taxes, as any government really, pretty much. So they might go after the real estate, the property, if the seller doesn't fully comply with the capital gains tax payment. And the capital gain taxes can be paid at closing. The notary can have instructions from the seller to settle capital gain taxes. And you want to be part of that process, because once again, the notary will receive whatever the seller tells the notary, but you want to review the paperwork and want to make sure that the capital gains taxes are calculated properly to avoid a potential lien or claim against your property should the capital gain tax obligation not be fulfilled as per the law. So in your purchase offer, at the time of signing your purchase offer, you want to ask the real estate agent, has the property been purchased less than 10 years ago? If the answer is no, you can completely disregard this part. However, if the property has been purchased less than 10 years ago, then definitely put on your radar the capital gains tax matter, and that should be addressed. And in the purchase offer, you want an express clause where it says that you are going to be part of the capital gain taxes verification, calculation, and payment in terms of monitoring and reviewing and saying your opinion on that. So one remedy is very often utilized by us is that the seller will agree that the purchase price or a portion of the purchase price will be left at the notary in the notary escrow account until the notary receives satisfactory evidence of the tax payment. So I think this is the last one we have for you today about title check. Obviously, title check is something that you do in any jurisdiction when you buy a property. So title check is very important. There is a significant difference in title checks when you have a bank or when you don't. If you don't have a bank involved, title check is done by the notary, usually just right before closing, a day or two before closing. And once again, after you put in motion everything, if there is a wrinkle in the title, it will create a huge amount of disruption in everything: traveling plans, moving, delivering, repairing, remodeling, whatever you had planned for that post-closing time. So What is an enhanced mortgage credit title check? Well, guess what? When a bank is involved in your property purchase, because as I said earlier, you can get a mortgage in Italy to finance an Italian property purchase, even if you don't earn any income in Italy. Um, so when a bank is involved, the bank will ask a notary to do a preliminary mortgage grade title check where the notary, weeks ahead of closing, tells the bank that the title has been checked and there are no wrinkles whatsoever. What are potential wrinkles? Well, one of the checks that banks are worried about is if within the previous 20 plus years there were any gifts, inheritance transfers, or other squatter rights or other implications that might affect the ability of the bank to sell a property after it is foreclosed should the borrower not pay his or her debt. So the bank will ask for this mortgage grade title check before um, going on with closing. And so before even bringing the loan to approval, because that's part of the requirements, like there's appraisal, there is enhanced mortgage rate title check, and then they will decide on the approval. So what I tell clients is you are not less prudent or wise than a bank. Why should you have less caution? So if in our opinion, before transferring any money to the seller, it would be wise to do a title check. And if there is any indication of potential issues, you to do an enhanced mortgage check. And how do you see if there is an issue? Well, if you see that the seller is able to provide you right away with all titles that have been exchanged in the past 20 years. They are all transactions like sales without any, as I said, gifts, inheritance, things like that, that might create third-party claims. In Italy, inheritance law is very complicated. You have to leave a certain portion of estate to certain family members, so. You don't need a mortgage enhanced, a mortgage title check. So what will reveal if you need it or not is an initial quick check. And notary can do that at the time of the purchase before you sign the purchase offer. Sometimes also surveyors are able to do a sort of title check. You want to ask, if you are worried, if you're concerned, you want to ask the notary for the relazione preliminare notarile, which is basically the document banks ask for in order to take the mortgage to the board for approval. This was it for today of the time we had. I wish we could cover more, but if at this point you are part of a group, of a team, and we will share with you more information in the next days. We are actually working to put in writing some of this and to address every single one of these items that you see on your screen and more, so that you can have more control, you can navigate the several steps of every purchase and can address them with more confidence. Obviously, this is what we do every single day for our clients. Been doing this for many years, and if you have any questions, you can always come to us. We will be very happy to help you.